Okay, hi Math 2. Let's get started on learning our last type of factoring for this chapter. So in this unit that we're working on is on factoring. And so just to give you a little background, remember we have done 4 types so far. We have factored using GCF, we have factored using grouping, we have factored using binomial square method, and the last one we just learned was factoring trinomials when A was equal to 1. Today, we are going to do trinomials when A is not equal to 1, a little more complicated, and it actually involves 3 of those 4 types that we have already done. So it's a big incorporation of a bunch of factoring types into one. So first, let's talk about the characteristics and how you know that you are going to factor using this method. So what has to happen in order for you to be able to use this method is 1, it has to be a trinomial. So that means that you have 3 terms. Okay, so if it has 3 terms, it's a possibility that you can use this method. The second way you know is that A will not be equal to 1. So that's a symbol for not equal to 1. If it's equal to 1, we could still do this method, but it's a lot faster if we did what we did the day before, which was see what multiplies to be C and adds to be B. And that was a lot faster. You could still use this method, but this method is, you'll see, has a lot of steps. There's 5 steps to complete this method. So if I were you and it was equal to 1, I would use the shortcut method. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right into some examples, and I'm going to show you 2 examples right off the bat, and we'll walk through these steps together. Okay, so our first example we're going to do, and I will definitely make sure that you're writing this down and following along. So our first example is going to be 6x squared plus 7x plus 2. All right, so right away, if we just double check these characteristics, there's only 2 things that need to happen. 1, it needs to be a trinomial. We're good to go. And 2, A is not equal to 1. So just to clarify, and we remember what these letters are, A is equal to 6, B is equal to 7, and C is equal to 2. Okay, the X's are not A, B, and C. Those are variables. Those are points that are on this parabola. Remember, this is a parabola, and that's why we're using the A, B, and C. Okay, let's go into some steps right away. I'll put the steps over here. So our steps is actually an acronym called SMRF. Okay, and this is also called the 5-step method. So if you were to look online, this is what it would be called, this 5-step method, but I have put the 5 steps into an acronym for you to try to remember. So the first letter in SMRF stands for, or S, is C if you can GCF. So we always want to check this. And some of us are having some problems because if you remember when we were factoring using binomial squares, some of us were thinking that they were prime, but if we would have GCF'd first, it would turn our binomial into a perfect square binomial. So we always want to check if we GCF first, because maybe we could factor again. So sometimes we'll practice this more where we factor twice, not just once, but we have to factor twice. But if we look at this problem here, we cannot GCF. 6, 7, and 2 do not have anything in common, and our X's are not all in a line, like they all don't have an X. So I'm just going to put a check mark by the S and say that I am done. We have factored, or we tried to GCF, it didn't work. Okay, now step M stands for multiply A times C. So that means the letter A times the letter C in your equation that you are given. So in this equation, our A is equal to 6. So step M is going to be A times C, which is 6 times 2. Okay, so 6 times 2 is 12. So step M is going to be 12 for us. Okay, that's all we're doing is multiplying A by C. So far, so good. Step 1 and 2 are done. 3 more to go. Okay, next, we need to do step I. So step I stands for identify what multiplies to be M, which is what we just found, but adds to equal B. Okay, so it multiplies to equal m, but adds to equal b. Okay, so this is where we incorporate that trinomial method we've already done. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so step I here. So what multiplies to be m, remember my m is 12 and my b is 7. So what multiplies to be 12, but adds to be 7. So multiplies to be 12, adds to be 7. So multiples of 12 could be 6 and 2, could be 4 and 3, could be 12 and 1. Okay, but I think we already have noticed that 4 and 3 are the two numbers that add to be 7, but multiply to be 12. Okay, so those are my two numbers in step 3. So my I step is 4 and 3. Okay, next, let's go to step R. So R stands for rewrite the equation, replace bx with step I. Okay, so the numbers that we found from step I. So here's what that looks like. Let me put this over here so I have a little bit more room. Okay, so step R. Okay, I'm going to rewrite this equation. So 6x squared plus 7x plus 2. So I'm going to replace and rewrite the equation and take bx out with what I found in I. So what that looks like is I'm going to take the 7x out. So it's going to go away. I'm going to replace it with the 4 and the 3. Okay, but it's like I'm breaking the 7x up into 4x and 3x. So that's what I'm doing. I'm taking the 7x, I'm breaking it up into the I that I identified. So this breaks up to be the 4x plus 3x. It does not matter the order that you write it in. So if you want to do 3x plus 4x, it's not going to matter. You're going to come up with the same solution in the end. Doesn't matter. Okay, but then what we have to do is we have to bring down the a and the c still. So still bring down the first and the last term. But what we're doing is we are just rewriting the equation and replacing the bx with our new factors that we found. Okay, so let me just give you a second to think about that. So again, what we did was we took this bx out, we replaced it with the ix. So we found I was 4 and 3, so that becomes 4x, 3x, split the 7x up into 4x, 3x, drop the 6x squared and 2 down like it's hot, and then we continue on. All right, so now our last step. So our last step, F, is to factor. Now look at this, take a quick look. Look at what we've turned this into. So we have turned this into a problem that has 4 terms. And what do we know about how we can factor when we have 4 terms? Anyone? Hopefully you're saying to yourself, grouping, I can factor by grouping. So now we have turned this into a factor by grouping, and now we can go ahead and solve it. So let's go over how we factor by grouping just in case you forgot. So we're going to take this, we're going to split it in half. On the left side, we're going to GCF. And so on the left side, I can GCF a 2x, and I'll be left with 3x plus 2. Okay. And then on the right, there's nothing that is in common over here. So if there's nothing in common, you still have to take something out. So they always have a 1 in common. So we're going to take out a 1. I'm also leaving the sign that was in front of this 3. So it's a plus 1. And I still have 3x plus 2. So remember, in grouping, your 2 parentheses need to match in order for it to work, and it does. So now I'm going to take my 2 GCFs here, the 2x and the plus 1, and I'm going to put that into a parenthesis by itself, 2x plus 1. And then I'm going to rewrite what they have in common, which is 3x plus 2. And now I have factored by grouping. Now, there is a final F step if you're interested in the final F step. The final F step, which is optional, is you can FOIL to check your work. So if I were to FOIL this back out, 2x times 3x give me my 6x squared, 2x times 2 is 4x, plus 3x gives me my 7x. And then 1 times 2 is 2. And so this is the correct answer because I know that if I were to FOIL this, I would get my original answer. All right. So you have successfully factored your first smurfing problem. Let's try one more that's a little more challenging that actually has an S step and has some negatives in it. So we'll try one more and then I'm going to write your homework problems on here. You'll have only 2 to do for homework. Okay, so I've already put up on here your the steps so we can follow that when we need to. All right, so example number 2 is going to be 16x squared minus 20x plus 6. Okay, so I'll try to go a little bit faster this time. Hopefully you're catching on and you can follow the steps along as we go. So first step, S, see if you can factor anything by GCF. So again, you could, like if you didn't notice that they had something in common here, you could still factor using Smurf. Your numbers are just going to be very big and it will be very irritating to try to find it. So to make your life simpler, you could notice that there's a 2 in common. And so we can take a 2 out and we'll be left with 8x squared minus 10x plus 3. All right, and so then what I'm going to do is right now, I'm just going to ignore this 2 that I just took out. The 2 is not important until the very, very end. So now what I'm going to do is I'm only going to focus on the 8x squared minus 10x plus 3. That's what I'm factoring right now because I've made it smaller and simpler for myself. So this 2, ignore it, we'll come back to it. So step M is to multiply A times C. So multiply 8 times 3, that's my A and my C, and I'm going to get 24. All right, step I is to identify what multiplies to be M. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to equal 24, because that's my M, but they're going to add to be B, which is negative 10. Okay, so it's going to be add to be negative 10. Okay, so this is a little tricky because how am I supposed to get 2 numbers to multiply to be positive, but then they add to be negative? So hopefully you remember your positive negative properties. So in order for this to happen, both of your numbers have to be negative because if you multiply 2 negatives, you'll get a positive. And then you add 2 negatives, you get a negative. So in this situation, both of our multiples of 24 have to be negative. So I'm just going to throw some down. So we have 8 times 3. So again, they have to be negative. So 8 times negative 3 is positive 24. But if I add them together, I get negative 11. So I'm not there yet. If I do negative 12 and negative 2, that still doesn't work because if I add them, I get negative 14. So let's try, we'll do negative 6 and negative 4. So negative 6 and negative 4, if I multiply them, I get positive 24. If I add them, I get negative 10. So these are my 2 numbers. So see how you have to kind of go through and you have to know your multiples and understand your positive negative properties as well. Okay, now step R is to rewrite. Rewrite and replace your BX with your answer from I. So remember, I'm using the 8x squared minus 10x plus 3. Okay, I'm replacing the BX. So I'm replacing the negative 10x and I'm replacing it with my negative 6 and negative 4. And those are becoming my, they need x's in front of them. I'm just splitting this negative 10x into these 2 numbers. So again, it doesn't matter which way I go. So let's do, it doesn't matter. We'll switch it around for funsies. So negative 4x minus 6x. Okay, so again, we're splitting up the negative 10x into negative 4 and negative 6. Drop down the A and drop down the C. So now it becomes a grouping problem. Okay, so drop down the plus 3, just be careful of your signs. All right, and now we are going to factor by grouping. Step F, factor by grouping. Okay, so if I split this down the middle, be careful. We're having problems with this when we're doing grouping. Split this down the middle. This negative goes with the 6. Okay, keep that negative with the 6. So on the left-hand side, I have a 4x in common. Okay, and so that leaves me with a 2x minus 1. On the right-hand side, here's where I need to be careful. So I want my parenthesis to be a negative. And right now, if I were to do that, it's going to be a positive. So this is the trick we have to remember is if we want to change the sign so it matches, we need to take a negative out. So this negative sign is going to stay out here. We're going to take a negative with me, and there's a 3 in common. You can take a 3 out. So we're going to take out a negative 3. So if I take out a negative 3 and divide these, this is going to turn into a positive 2x. And then when I divide this by a negative, it's negative 3, it will turn into a negative 1. So this is where some of us are just missing that key little thing about a negative sign. So just be careful. I'm taking out a negative, which is going to change my sign. Now my parentheses match. Now I am good to go. And I'll do my final step of putting my GCFs together. So 4x minus 3. And then 2x minus 1. What they have in common comes next. You can have these switched around. You could have 2x minus 1 and then 4x minus 3. It doesn't matter. But that is the final problem. And then if you would like to FOIL to check your work, if you FOIL it back out, oh, wait, we forgot something. We forgot this 2. Now here's where the 2 comes back in. So now you can take this 2, drop that like it's hot, put it on the outside of the parentheses, and now this is the final factored version. So you could FOIL this out and then multiply everything by 2, and it will get you back to this original 16x squared minus 20x plus 6. All right, hopefully those 2 examples were good for you. Let's have some practice on your own now. So I'm going to give you 2 homework problems on this next page. Okay, so here's your homework. You're just going to have 2 Smurf problems to do. Okay, so here's number 1. It is going to be 4x squared plus 18x plus 20. And then number 2 is going to be 12x squared minus 5x minus 2. All right, good luck on these. Let me know if you have any questions.